Good afternoon. I'd like to call the August 6, 2013 City Council meeting to order. Please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco?
Here.
Hotchkiss? House?
Here.
Murillo?
Here.
Rouse? Here. White? Mayor Schneider? Proclamation acknowledging the 50th anniversary of the Los Paisanos Golf Club.
Who is here for that this afternoon? Come on up. Welcome. In the early 1960s, a group of 25 Mexican-American golfers who regularly played golf at the city's municipal golf course came together to form the Los Paisanos Golf Club. And in 1963, it became an official member organization of the Public Links Golf Association and was chapter member of the Southern California Mexican Golf Association from 1978 to 1984. And the purpose of the Los Paisanos Golf Club is to provide monthly home tournaments at the Santa Barbara Golf Club and travel opportunities for monthly away golf tournaments, as well as social opportunities for the enjoyment of its members as part of all club activities. And the Los Paisanos Golf Club continues to exist today with a diversified group of members who enjoyed the opportunity to socialize with fellow golfers on a regular basis for tournament play, both at the Santa Barbara Golf Club and by traveling to other area golf courses. And it's an official home golf club recognized by the Parks and Recreation Department, and their members continue to support the original purpose for establishing the club. Now, therefore, I, Helene Schneider, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby congratulate the Los Paisanos Golf Club for their occasion, on the occasion of their 50th anniversary, and thank them for their contribution in providing tournament and social activities for area residents. Congratulations, and thank you very much. If you'd like to say anything.
I would just like to thank the mayor and the council for their acknowledgement of our mutually beneficial relationship over the last 50 years, and invite any of you who might be interested to come to our tournament, the anniversary tournament on Sunday, August 25th at Muni. So, thank you.
Employee recognition, service award pins.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you know, every month we present service award pins to employees who are celebrating important anniversaries with the city, and this month we're presenting several, and I'd like to read their names into the record. So first, with 5 years, Sadie Lumen, who's a police technician, Malcolm Hamilton, administrative assistant in Public Works, and Sergio Arriaga, who's an assistant parking coordinator at the waterfront. With 10 years, Senan Aparicio, who's the Environmental Services Specialist in Public Works, and Marvel Sembrano Esparza, who's the Senior Library Technician over at the Eastside Library. With 15 years, Fernando Camarillo, Custodian in Public Works, and Rich Hanna, Senior Recreation Supervisor in Parks and Rec. With 25 years, Al Alvarez, who's a Police Record Specialist. And here to receive her pin with 35 years is Becky Jimenez, who's the parking supervisor in Public Works, and what I consider one of the real unsung heroes in the city.
Bring her on up. You're welcome. Rebecca Jimenez, or Becky, as she's known in parking, started with the City of Santa Barbara as a CETA worker, C-E-T-A worker. Hired in July 1989 as a permanent employee, she worked as a parking enforcement officer for 13 years. In August of 1991, Becky began working as a parking technician in the Transportation and Parking Division. In April of 1994, Becky was promoted to the position of parking coordinator. As a parking coordinator, she began to lay the groundwork for the type of lot operator staff we now have. She's directly involved in the recruitment, hiring, and training of the parking lot operators. In February 2002, Becky was promoted to parking supervisor, where she currently oversees 6 parking coordinators and the parking office staff. She and her staff ensure that all 14 city-operated parking lots are fully staffed throughout the years, including all evenings, weekends, and most holidays. Becky's an excellent role model, leader, and coach of a diverse work group that includes retirees and high school-age students. She communicates effectively with all kinds of people, and like a good coach, she praises, teaches, and motivates staff to do their best at all times. Becky's very honest and is unafraid to tell it like it is. She's firm yet fair, yet never hesitates to counsel an employee when guidance is needed. As a good leader, Becky continues to learn more about leadership, all while encouraging her staff to learn more and become more effective at their jobs. She's always been dedicated to providing the very best in customer service. From her very first day in downtown parking, she understood that in order to have a first-class parking operation, we had to have a first-class staff. And in order to have that, we had to hire the best, train them well, motivate, encourage, and appreciate them, and lead by example. Becky's devotion to bringing out the best in her staff has shined through time and again. The continued success of the downtown parking program is owed largely to the environment Becky has helped to create. So, Becky, it's with great pleasure that we honor you today for your 35 years of service to the City of Santa Barbara. On behalf of the City Council, the citizens of Santa Barbara, and your fellow employees, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Mayor, Council, and Mr. Armstrong, thank you so much for acknowledging my 35 years. It's been a real honor to serve our beautiful city for 35 years. And for me, it's been a special privilege to serve my last 22 years at Downtown Parking with so many wonderful, special folks, and too many to name. It would take all afternoon. So to all my downtown parking family, all the Feas and the Mijos, I want to say thank you. You have truly enriched my life and brought so much great joy. I am very proud to be a part of the DTP team. To my fellow city employees and friends that I've met over the years, I thank you too for all your support and smiles. You have made my 35-year journey so special. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. You're truly an ambassador to thousands upon thousands of visitors and residents through your teachings of staff, so thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there aren't, Madam Mayor.
Okay, public comment. I have a couple of speaker slips here in 2 minutes. Here at the podium, we'll start with Matthew Kramer and then Steve Reynolds. I'm sorry, Mr. White, did you have something?
Only when we start the consent agenda, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay. All right. Mr. Kramer, just hold on as people leave the office, the chambers. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. It's a pleasure to see all of you, minus Mr. Hotchkiss at the Fiesta Parade. I wish him a speedy recovery. I wanted to comment on a few things on the agenda. Last meeting, we talked about the Mason Street Bridge project. I am not in favor of that after talking with some members of the former Landmarks Commission about some of the buildings that were to be raised during that project. I think the money would be better spent elsewhere. I also wanted to call to your attention that I am a city council candidate, and I do have a conflict with the Virginia Casagnola Hunter Trust, item number 13. That is my grandfather's ex-wife, hence the Hunter name, and it expresses my deep roots in the community, but she does not support me, nor have I received any support from her. So I will not comment on that. I do want to say something about the Fire and Police Commission, which I recently attended. I understand you're having a report from Mr. Sanchez today. And I would ask him again about his comments on the natural light in the 911 center. As a scientist, I find that interesting because natural light is usually not wanted when you have communications equipment and telephones around. So I'd like him to clarify those thoughts and also whether that $2 million will actually decrease crime. I was much distressed at his report to the commissioners showing that we went from 0 murders in the last 2 years to 3 murders this year, and that's a pretty significant statistical increase. There was also an increase in gang crime, which he pointed out, And so I'd like to ask him what we can do as city residents and city council members to help him in his job so that we can get rid of this rash of crime that's going on. Thank you very much for your time, and look for me in some of the debates. I will clarify my issues. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Steve Reynolds? Be the final public comment speaker.
Good afternoon. Last week, I used my time to describe how I felt local justice system had painted a pre-fiesta target on my back. Their intentions were made quite clear when the police invaded the sanctuary of a church, as if I were sitting there like $400 wrapped in a pretty green bow. This was not the highlight of my afternoon, however. I had the opportunity to personally listen to the rants and allegations being assailed by Mr. Scholes. While looking like a beach bum, he went on to claim that the downtown organization can't make enough money fast enough, being plagued by folks who are always seen down on their luck. Before the Fiesta Courthouse festivities started, I vacated the downtown area to travel southwards towards the Bike and Hike Carpinteria, getting away for the weekend, and the situation is not that easy, but I found I was more than glad to accommodate the flood of tourists. I found myself late Friday evening near Calvary Church. This turned out to be a bad choice of a waypoint, since this is the same spot of town where the City Police K-9 unit has his free time. Officer Payne made that quite clear when he showed up, directed his high beams on me, and instructed me that I had to leave because I was on private property. After I explained to him there really was nothing around us but private property, he gave me no other option but to hide better. What couldn't be more ironic was this particular space was clearly out of sight. I felt this officer was giving me commands just as he would the animal that was tagging along with him. I did leave. Instead of camping at Carp, I dragged my bike, backpack, and bedroll in the middle of the night to State and De La Guerra. The next morning, I sent a rather disturbing letter to the downtown district informing them that the city's animals had marked their territory, and I had now marked mine. I informed them that the police were quite aware how clearly I understand the tactics of urban recon and occupation, treating me like an animal and then expecting me not to urinate in your flower planters or defecate in your bushes would be extremely poor judgment. I made it quite clear to the city attorney just how desperate this situation has become. I'm seriously concerned about my inability to differentiate between animal I am supposed to be and the happy-go-lucky, out-of-work transient constantly picking up and going somewhere
Need
else.
to wind up, please. Your 2 minutes are up, so if you need to wind
I
up.
apologize.
It's okay.
I've requested many complaints from the city. They've lawyered up. I will continue to take this matter to the right authorities. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. We move on to the, did you have a public comment? Come on up if you could hand your speaker slip to the clerk here. Go right ahead. If you can state your name, please.
Richard Garrett,
Thank you.
City Council, Madam Mayor. I wanted to say something about, I read something in the newspaper.
I'm going to stop you right. Are you here about the Children's Museum?
That's right.
So we'll hold off until we reach that item on the agenda.
I can't, because I have to go somewhere at.
I know. Well, we'll get there very shortly. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Hold that thought. All right, if we can get to the consent calendar.
Item number 4, a tournament agreement with H. Oliver Dixon and Montecito Bank and Trust for an airport property. Recommendation that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute an tournament agreement among the City of Santa Barbara, H. Oliver Dixon Incorporated, and Montecito Bank and Trust pertaining to lease agreement number 21,810 dated November 1, 2005.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dixon is a client of mine, so I would like to recuse myself from that item.
Which number?
Item 4.
Item 4. Okay, is there a motion for item number 4?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And one
I
abstention?
abstain.
One abstention. Okay, anything else on the consent calendar? Or is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, item number 11.
Successor agency proposed transfer of property to the city, city acceptance of property, and approval of agreements providing for the land for the lease and development of a children's museum at 125 State Street. Recommendation that Council A, that the successor agency to the redevelopment agency of the City of Santa Barbara adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the successor agency to the redevelopment agency of the City of Santa Barbara in accordance with the long-range property management plan to transfer the parcels designated for the Children's Museum of Santa Barbara owned by the former redevelopment agency to the City of Santa Barbara. B, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara in accordance with the long-range property management plan to accept and assume all right, title, and interest to the real property described herein owned by the successor agency to the former redevelopment agency of the City of Santa Barbara, and authorize the city administrator to execute such agreements and related documents as necessary to effectuate such transfer of real property interest to the City of Santa Barbara. And D, that City Council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the city administrator to execute a 50-year ground lease with Santa Barbara Children's Museum on city-owned property located at 125 State Street.
Thank you. Mr. Casey.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. This has been a long road for the Children's Museum and for the city to try to effectuate this project, but we think today is really one of the final official acts you need to take as a city council to make this happen. As you're aware, the properties that we're talking about for the Children's Museum are on Lower State Street and were owned by the redevelopment agency and got caught up in the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. And so we've had to go through an arduous process of dissolving the redevelopment agency, including all of its assets and properties. And the last time we were with you, about a month or two ago, dealing with property, we were asking for your approval of a long-range property management plan that talked about the disposition of the properties, and that 4 parcels down in the Railroad Depot area would be transferred to the city so that we could effectuate a 50-year lease with the Children's Museum so that they could build their fully entitled project that they are anxious and ready to get going on for construction. I'm happy to report that the State Department of Finance approved that long-range property management plan and sent us a letter back. They pulled out, they didn't approve the plan, I take that back. They approved the 4 parcels dealing with the Children's Museum project. They were kind enough to kind of bifurcate and pull those out because they knew the interest of the Children's Museum to get going and have this property issue resolved. They did that. They sent a letter back and said, by the way, we've approved the plan, but now you have to implement the plan, which means you have to do a few more hoops and hurdles to actually transfer the land to the city. And so that's what we're before you today, is to take that final action of transferring the land from the successor agency, which was holding onto the former redevelopment property, to the city. The Oversight Board and the Department of Finance have already approved that final transfer, and so this is kind of the last step in the land acquisition side, disposition side. And we also then think it's appropriate now to enter into the license agreement and a 50-year ground lease with the Children's Museum so they can be on their way. Real briefly, just a map to orient you. This is down in the Lower State Street area. Here's State Street and Yananali Street. The Railroad Depot is over here. You can see the railroad tracks. So it's between State and Kimberly near Yananali Street. And it's 4 parcels. Really, the biggest parcel is a shaded one where most of the construction, I think all the construction occurs on this major parcel, but then there's just 3 other small parcels that kind of piggyback around the railroad track. Here's the design. It's about a 17,000 square foot building, a little bit less, 3 stories, has received all its approvals from Historic Landmarks Commission and the Planning Commission, and is ready to get going. So in summary, the license and lease terms, just wanted to give you the basic groundwork. It's a pretty straightforward lease from the city in that regard. The license agreement is during the construction phase, and so it grants the right to access and construct the building through the Children's Museum. It has a provision that it'll be constructed within 3 years. There is an opportunity for a 1-year extension if for whatever reason construction is delayed and not able to be completed in 3 years, but we think that that should be enough time. At the conclusion of the construction, when they receive their certificate of occupancy, then the ground lease provisions kick in. It's a 50-year lease. That's the maximum allowed under the city charter. It's for no rent. It does have operating requirements that they be operating as a children's museum. And the city does receive annual reports on their operation just to confirm and make sure that they are operating in an adequate manner with conditions of the lease. The next steps to effectuate all this is your action today on the property transfer between the successor agency and the city, granting of the license agreement, and the introduction of the ground lease. It's actually an ordinance form, so you're introducing it today, and then next week it'll be on your consent calendar, and then effective 30 days after that. As I mentioned, all the planning and design approvals are in place, and so the next step is for the Children's Museum to work on final design, finish their fundraising, and submit for plan check and begin construction. So this really is some of the last formal actions you need to take as a city council to make this happen. So with that, the staff report kind of laid out the 4 actions: the transfer of the parcels, the acceptance of the parcels, executing the license agreement, and then also executing the ground lease. Happy to answer any questions, and I know there's members from the Children's Museum here to speak as well.
Questions, and we'll go to public comment after that. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I received an email from Kellum DeForest expressing concern about the possibility of of the project sort of getting halfway done, and then they're basically it's leased out and the building isn't done. Could you discuss the reassurances that the city has for having a complete project as part of the package?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Councilmember White, and I think members of the Children's Museum Board can also comment about that. It's why the license agreement is good for 3 years. It essentially kind of holds a time period in which we want to see construction completed by. And if construction hasn't started or isn't completed, then technically the land comes back to the city. And so that's kind of our ability to kind of control in that regard. I think fundraising to date by the Children's Museum has been quite strong. I think it has been stagnant, waiting for the resolution of the property acquisition phase through the redevelopment dissolution. So I think the board members might be able to speak a little bit about that as well. I will say, as we have seen through this economy, there are no assurances. There is nothing the city can do to force a private nonprofit or private entity to finish a construction. Things happen beyond people's control or expectations. And so I don't want to say that once they put a shovel in the ground, they will finish the project. We can't foresee what might happen to the local economy, natural disaster, who knows what. But I think we have assurances in place to the best of our ability to ensure that once they start, they do finish and complete a project.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Casey, what starts the 3-year clock? Is it occupancy or is it actually the acquisition of the property?
The 3-year license agreement starts today with the granting of the license, and then the 50-year lease begins with certificate of occupancy.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on Lower State Street with Entrada, the bridge, the other bridge. And I remember Mr. Kelly talking about sort of staging different plannings. But I mean, I believe the Children's Museum was part of that planning process, even though we weren't quite sure yet what the Department of Finance was going to do. So I guess we're going to also need some updates as things move forward with Entrada, with the Mission Creek Bridge at Cabrillo, and then this about how to get around that part of town. Any new information? I mean, it's just sort of, well, I know we're on it, right?
Exactly.
I guess that's all I need to hear.
Mr. Kelly and Mr. Orwaziak have the maps about all the different dominoes that are happening down there, and the Children's Museum has been on their radar. When they come in for plan check, that'll be part of the construction staging that we'll go in and look at and see where the other bridge projects are at the time, see where the Entrada project is at the time, and make it all work.
You said there was a potential year extension of the 3-year license agreement about construction, and one of the reasons we may need that is if one of the other projects outside their control has to do with something. I mean, do you foresee any kind of delay on other projects as it pertains to their construction, or they can just go for it and, okay?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we envision that when they're ready, they can go forward and we will work and stage the projects accordingly. We won't be delaying the Children's Museum project for any of the bridge projects or anything else.
Okay, because, yeah, I know we want to get this thing open already, right? Just something like that. Okay, we do have some public comment. Why don't we start with Richard Garrett? Why don't you come on up? And we have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll be followed by Sergio Villa. Good afternoon.
Like I said, I read about the Children's Museum in the newspaper, and I was happy when I first read about it. Then I was thinking, boy, that's kind of strange to have a museum across the street from the 1 block from the beach, and I was kind of concerned about the city's idea of a long-term plan for transportation was my counter to the Children's Museum is the highest and best use for that property. Seems like it's like putting a playground across the street from Disneyland. I mean, you got Cabrillo, you got the Ty Warner Center, you got the skateboard park, you got the Maritime Museum, you got the Natural History Museum. The problem coming into Santa Barbara is transportation. And I thought the city and our government in general was working on transportation problems. Coast Village Road is a mess. And you come into the city and there's no way to get around. If you're a tourist, you don't take MTD. So my better alternative for that location would be the city incrementally try to alleviate traffic and get rid of the cars, which is what they wanted to do years ago. And they haven't addressed, I don't know if you guys have addressed the automobile problem here in town. Better use for that property might be people get off the train or a tour bus or a cruise ship, and there is transportation available at that location. Electric buses, smart cars. And that seems like that's going to be the hub of our transportation center. We got Greyhound, we got Amtrak, we got the train, we got cruise ships now. These people are walking up State Street. It seems if you have electric cars there, it would make a lot more sense. It would boost the economy. And it would get people to go to the Natural History Museum, which is up there on the hill. I don't think they're getting a lot of turnout there. There's nothing wrong with the Children's Museum. We got a lot of museums here. And I think they're underutilized. That's what I think.
Thank you.
And an extra one doesn't really help our downtown.
Okay. Sergio Villa will be followed by Scott Hadley.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Sergio Villa. I'm the Secretary of the Children's Museum. I've served on this board for about 5 years, and when I started serving on this board, I didn't have any kids yet. Right now, I have a 4-year-old and I have a 1-year-old. Over the last 5 years, I've had a chance to see what the Children's Museum could look like. And I'm extremely excited that you guys have been a strong partner and collaborator with us to try to bring the Children's Museum here into Santa Barbara. Clearly, one of the things that my wife is a school teacher here in town, one of the challenges some of the teachers have, especially at a young age, is how to inspire kids and really how to inspire them to go after the science, the math, the technology, the engineering, which is a catalyst for future economic growth, not just here in Santa Barbara, but in this nation. I'm excited that this is going to be a strong, our emphasis is STEAM, those four, and adding arts to that. The other thing that I'm really excited about is before we even built this museum, we said we want this museum to be not just for the Santa Barbara community, but it should be by the community. And we've gone out and reached out to over 50 local agencies that target youth and said, what do you need in a museum here in town? If we were to build something for you, what is it going to look like? And we're incredibly excited that I would say 99% of what the museum looks like today is as a result of that collaboration that started from a grassroots level. Finally, I want to thank a couple of other people that have been very instrumental, and you're going to hear from them today. And one of them is Brownstein Hyatt. As an attorney firm, a firm here in town, they've devoted over 3 years, over $200,000 in services to our museum. And I'd really want to thank them so much for their work because they've been very extremely helpful for us. So with that in mind, you're going to hear from some of our board members and Beth at the end, which is going to answer some of the questions that you guys have asked, along with some questions that maybe you haven't even thought about. Okay, thank you.
Scott Hadley will be followed by Danielle Harlow.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Scott Hadley. I'm the treasurer and the chair of the Finance Committee of the Children's Museum. Like Sergio, I've been involved for about 6 years, and all of my children, 3 of them, were in their single digits when I started, and we're really excited, and now they're hoping to work there. But we're on our way. I wanted to update you on just a couple of the financial aspects of our quiet phase of the campaign that's been going on. And first of all, I also wanted to say that our executive director, the president of our board, and the chair of our campaign committee can't be with us today. They're out of town with a potential naming donor for a meeting and hopefully coming back with some exciting news, but they send their regrets. Regarding our quiet campaign, we have a $21 million campaign goal. That includes a $2 million endowment. So far to date, we have $5.1 million in pledges just from our board members alone. And we have some 7-figure pledges in the works pending this lease approval. As was mentioned earlier, there's some things that have been kind of holding off and making sure that we're moving forward. We expect to have over $10 million in October on that $21 million goal. And at that $10 million point, we expect to start our community campaign, which will make that whole campaign of fundraising a lot more public as well. Thank you.
Danielle Harlow will be followed by Andrew Firestone and then Beth Collins-Burgard.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Danielle Harlow. I'm an assistant professor of science education at UCSB. I work with pre-service elementary school teachers to teach them how to teach science. I've worked with hundreds of elementary school teachers and their students. I've been working as an advisor to the exhibits committee and to their exhibits designer to plan exhibits that meet the needs of our local teachers and students. The new Next Generation Science Standards are a new set of science standards that our students and teachers will be held accountable in the next few years in California. They cover complex science topics like motion and light and sound. In addition, for the first time, engineering will be part of the science standards. Teachers will be expected to teach science in ways that engage students in scientific practices like analyzing evidence and developing and using models. Teachers and students will need help developing instruction to meet these high expectations. Informal science learning environments like the Children's Museum are a critical resource to our schools. Unfortunately, Santa Barbara has exceptional informal science providers in the life sciences, but we are lacking such resources in the physical sciences. The planned Children's Museum of Santa Barbara exhibits and programs will fulfill this important gap in our community. It will help teachers and school children learn science through activities that are both educationally sound and fun. I believe the museum will serve as a model for how instruction can be both powerful and enjoyable. So I want to thank the council for partnering with the Children's Museum on this important resource for our students.
Andrew Firestone.
Madam Mayor and City Council members, thank you for allowing us to come and present. I am a member of the board for the Children's Museum. I have also been on for 5 years, so long, actually before these guys could even grow facial hair. I've been a member. And over that time, we actually have had, it seems like a long time, but we've had a variety of, I think hoops and hurdles is what you described them as. And through all those, we have stayed dedicated to this project. We have a very dedicated board that is going to see this thing through. And to address your concern there, we don't even have the permission to go forward yet. We're waiting for that. But we still have total 100% buy-in from our members. We've raised over, or committed over $5 million just from our board alone. And the $10 million number that was mentioned earlier will complete the building. So I want to put your concerns at ease that this building is going to go forward. It is going to be well-funded, and it's going to be a great aspect of the Santa Barbara community. I reconfirmed why I've been a member by taking my son, who's 4.5, down to the Children's Museum down in Los Angeles. And after spending just a few hours there, we drove back 2.5 hours, and he wouldn't be quiet. He just chatted the whole way about the things that he saw, the things that he did. I think, earlier speaker, there are some fantastic things here in Santa Barbara, the Maritime Museum, the Natural History Museum. This is going to be something very different. This is forward-looking. This is engaging kids to think for themselves, not think about the past, but think about the future. So with that, thank you very much, and we look forward to this project going forward.
Beth Collins-Burgard.
Hello, Mayor Schneider and council members. I'm Beth Collins-Burgard from Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck. I've been the Children's Museum's land use and real estate attorney for the last 3 years. First, I want to thank City and its staff for working so tirelessly with us on this project. 2 years ago, we finalized the entitlement, the CEQA entitlement review process, and we're found to be a community priority project. Usually that's the last hurdle. That's when the celebration is occurring. But we were in the middle of lease negotiations, and then we were hurled, like many other projects, into this quagmire of redevelopment, the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies. The city then proceeded to work diligently with us and the Oversight Board and the Department of Finance, which were all amazing, to get us through this redevelopment process in record time. Paul was really, in my opinion, did not toot the horn of the city enough on this. Santa Barbara is one of the first, if not the first in the state, to get a portion of their long-range property management approved by the Department of Finance. We received our last approval on Friday, just this Friday. Now the parcels are being transferred back to the city where they belong, and now we have the lease and the license before you, and we are almost there. Before I went to law school, I joined Teach for America. And I taught 7th and 8th grade science and in the inner city for 5 years. My students would have loved this museum. It will be an amazing asset to our community, focused on, again, you've heard, science, technology, engineering, and math education. I also want to thank Brownstein for supporting my work on this Children's Museum with giving free legal services over the last 3 years, and my partners who also assisted me in working on this project. I really appreciate working somewhere that supports that type of community service. Finally, I have 7-year-old twins who go to Monroe, and I just can't wait to be there with them on opening day. So please, we hope that you can take this final step and make this happen today. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. It's back to the council. Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move recommendations A, B, C, and D.
There's moved and seconded. I think we're all excited to see this happen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. All right. Thank you very much. That's right. I think we've had this conversation a number of times. So go forth and finish raising your money. All right. Moving on to item number 12.
Police Department update.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'm almost there. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, Mr. Armstrong. It's time for my update on the department. We have quite a bit of information. I'll try to go as quickly as I can. I have some other folks here that are going to assist me today briefly. Before we go to the slide after this, which is going to be our Fiesta statistics, I wanted to thank, for the record, some great people that helped us. As you know, Fiesta is quite the challenge every year, especially for resources for law enforcement. So I wanted to for the record, thank several agencies: Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department, Highway Patrol, Santa Barbara Probation, Ventura Probation, SEMI PD, ABC, Santa Paula Police Department, Lompoc Police Department, and UCSB Police Department. They sent a bunch of folks to help us out, and I think we were very successful. But they do that every year, and we're very grateful that they send them here. So we'll go to the slide. Got some interesting statistics here. We had quite a decrease in some of the issues. If you look at traffic, that did go up a little bit, the traffic citations, and we'll get more in depth in a couple of slides from now. Parking citations went down. Part of the reason is that, as you know, last year I began to give grace periods, if you will, for folks attending our parades, that they not get cited, and that we pretty much as a police department not enforce the parking laws because of the size of people, the number of people that attend those great events, and we just found it more user-friendly to not cite those people that were over the time limit because of the great events that are here, and it just caused more of a problem, and we thought it was a good faith effort on our part as a city, as a police department, to not cite in many of the locations for the parade specifically. So that was down 32%. Municipal code, again, down 17%. Miscellaneous infractions, down 10%. We did tow more vehicles. And when we talk about folks driving without a driver's license, which is 12,500, it was an increase of 20%. And, of course, the suspended, revoked license, which is the 14601 vehicle code, it went up 50%. In terms of arrests were down from Wednesday to Saturday night. Felonies went down by 27%. Misdemeanors down 55%. DUIs were down. And felony DUIs, we had none, as we did not have any last year. An interesting thing that I thought you would want to hear has to do with any gang activity during Fiesta. A number of gang members and former gang members were noted in the downtown area during Fiesta. However, due to the high visibility patrol, there were no real significant gang-related issues at all, so it worked out pretty well. Several gang members were arrested, however. These arrests were either for outstanding warrants. They were folks that were wanted, and we recognized them. They were there. We addressed it, and they were arrested for the warrants, not for an action they were committing at the time. But they were wanted individuals. There were a couple of fights involving gang members, including one involving a motorcycle gang from outside of our city and some older previous gang members. No arrests were made. We got there in time to just sort of break it up, and there were no weapons and no great violence, but there were gang members there. But most of them were motorcycle gang members from outside of the area. But again, no arrests were made. The officers, my officers were vigilant throughout Fiesta Week, and really the main focus regarding gangs was to certainly keep everyone safe, absolutely. The hard work that the officers did really fell into the great strategy that they came up with to have a presence, but not an overbearing presence, but be there for everyone's safety, and I believe we were extremely successful in doing that. So in terms of gang activity on Fiesta, little to none, which was good. There were some that did attend. There were several who happened to be at O'Malley's and saw me walk by and wanted to take their picture with me, and they thanked me for keeping them safe. They were there with their girlfriends, and really a good time was held by all, and I was really happy with the work that our gang units did prior to the events, and of course the vigilance that we kept during the events. So all in all, in terms of crime and citations and any gang activity, pretty minimal, and we thought it was a great fiesta. We noticed numbers were down. What is interesting that is not on the slide, statistic-wise, and I'm not going to go through the several hundred numbers here, and I will surely send this to you if you wish, but when we break down who was committing the crimes, who was being cited, I thought it was interesting for you to know that on Wednesday, 29, this is a combination of citations, arrests, and miscellaneous calls for service. 29% on Wednesday were Santa Barbara County residents who were either arrested or cited. 71% on Wednesday were outside of county residents. On Thursday, started to get a little busier. Those cited and or arrested, 39% on Thursday night were Santa Barbara County residents, and 61% who were arrested or cited were from out of our county, outside of our county. On Friday, 45% of the citations and arrests were of Santa Barbara County residents, and 55% outside of county. And then Saturday night came, and it turned around completely. And of the cites and arrests, 73% were Santa Barbara County residents and 26% were outside of county. I thought that was rather interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email all of you this litany of numbers so you can see the types of crimes and really take it down to a real minuscule explanation of each crime and from where the suspects or cite receivers came from. I think it's rather interesting because we do get many people from outside of our county that are here, and clearly 3 out of the 4 days, way past the majority, were people from out of our county that were committing the crimes or getting cited. I think that's pretty interesting, and I think it's something we need to continually pay attention to. And that is really the biggest reason that we have outside police agencies. Many of these arrests of outside Santa Barbara County residents are people that we would not recognize who were wanted. And yet Simi PD, Lompoc, they would see individuals saying, that guy is wanted in our city. And the arrests were made. So I thought that was rather interesting, but I think it really assists us as a city to have a safe fiesta when we bring these outside agencies for their help, because it truly prevents something from happening any one of those nights. On Sunday, last year, Mr. Francisco asked me a great question as to what we were going to do about the Sunday non-city sponsored bicycle ride. So what I decided to do this year was to borrow, we did give them back, although I like them a lot, were the large signs from Caltrans advising those that were riding on Sunday that all traffic laws were going to be enforced. We also did something that we hadn't done, which was to go to the dolphin near the beach at the pier, and meet with as many riders as we could. There were over 5,000. And we had all the officers there, all the motor officers there. We shook hands with the people that we thought were in charge. We still don't know who really is in charge. And advised them that this is your warning, that you will not impede traffic or pedestrians. This is your warning, and so are the signs as you go up State Street. So on Sunday, we wrote 64 traffic sites, mostly running red lights and causing havoc with the vehicles that had the right-of-way, and 12 municipal code violations, which are, no riding on the sidewalk and, basically knocking people over on the sidewalk. So we had 64 traffic sites on Sunday just for that event and 12 municipal code violations. Of the 76 citations, we've had one complaint. And the person that I spoke to today did, in fact, admit that he did run the red light, but he just thought he should have been warned more than he was warned. So I told him to take it up with the judge in traffic court and see how it goes. I also shared with him and others that a bicycle versus car, we all know who's going to win that. So we do this for a particular reason, to keep everyone safe. Over the years, it continues to grow. I can't imagine getting anything but a bigger crowd next year, and we're going to utilize the same, if not more, enforcement next year. But it just keeps everyone safe, and that really was Sunday's big push, and I believe it was extremely successful. We had no accidents, no even near misses. So I think we're on the right track in terms of that Sunday non-city sponsored event. Calls for service, I'm really proud of these statistics. We've been extremely busy, but if you look on there, you'll see that we have priority 1s, 2s, and 3s. Obviously, as I've mentioned before, priority 1s are emergency calls for service that could be life-threatening. Our goal is always 6 minutes for our P3 goal. In June, our response times to those types of calls for service, the 911 calls, et cetera, was 5.8 minutes response time. And in July, just last month, it was down to 5 minutes and 4 seconds. In terms of Part 2, which are also emergency calls but not life-threatening, in June, it was 14 minutes and 5 seconds, and it was 13 minutes exactly. It was the average last month in July. And the other priorities total, 32.3, 32 minutes and 3. These are calls that you get home, a bike is missing, your home has been burglarized, or something's been taken. There's no danger, no imminent danger, but it's a police report. That was 32, a little over a half hour, down to less than a half hour, 28.2 last month. So I think that's something to be proud of. We're responding quickly, and we're doing what we have to do to keep the city safe. Obviously, our biggest concerns are always the Part 1 crimes that you see listed there to the left. When we look at July of last year to July of this year, you'll see the negatives. You'll see them down completely a year ago. And I won't go over all of the numbers, but some of the real heavy-duty ones are the aggravated assaults. In July of 12, it was 35. In July of 13, it was 25. And if you look, just without going over all the numbers with you and at your leisure you could look at them, look at all of the Part 1 crimes that absolutely went down. The graph at the bottom clearly shows that. June of 2013, we were almost at 244 Part 1 crimes. Remember, these are the crimes to the left. the big ones, as we like to call them: homicides, rapes, robberies, aggravated assault, burglary, stolen cars, burglary from vehicles, and other thefts. We were at 244, and a year later, 201. There are a variety of reasons for this. Obviously, it's great police work. The detectives over the last several months, especially in the burglary section, have made many arrests of burglars, either burglary from motor vehicle or residents or businesses. We've made a lot of arrests on those folks. And almost all of those folks are attached to narcotic issues. So these numbers look great today. July 2013, we have a total of 201, which is, I think, an outstanding decrease in Part 1 crimes. Gang incidents, June to July of this year. If you take a look, we had one attempt murder in June, one attempt murder in July of this year. Robbery, we had one attempt. Battery on schools, 0. Assault with deadly weapons, we had 1 in June, 2 in July. Disturbing the peace, we've had 2 in June and 1 in July. When we talk about brandishing, that's brandishing a weapon of any kind, usually a handgun or a rifle, 0 and 0. Switchblade or knife, 0 and 0. Violation of a court order, we just had 1 in June, none in July. And possession of deadly weapon, in June it was 3, and July it was 0. You see the word other. In June we have 12, July we have 17. What that encompasses are the following: narcotic use or narcotics for sales, arrests of gang members, violations of parole or probation, and we've had several child endangerment committed by gang members. That could be they're arrested in a narcotics house and they have small children there. They're endangering the children. We've had some of them being pulled over for DUI with children in the car. So that is what the other means, other than the big ones that you see above.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, I think we had talked before in the past about having those listed out and maybe in another table. I think it would be interesting for us and to the public to know specifically what those other items are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Staffing and hiring, we're doing very well. Thank you so much. We're authorized 142 police officers today. We have filled 144, so we're over by 2. I thank you for that. Currently, we have several major injuries to officers that are going to be gone for a few months. So this really assists us in keeping the patrol teams close to full strength, and that really, really is extremely helpful. We currently have 5 in the police academy. This week is week 14. The academy, as you know, is 22 weeks, so they still have a few weeks of fun before they get to come here and work for you full time. So we're looking forward to that. Dispatchers, we have 40 currently on a list, and next week, I believe, we start doing oral interviews for those candidates to fill the 3 vacancies that we currently have. We haven't been at 15 in a long time, and it's a tough job. It's probably, I believe, I call it the lifeblood of the police department. These are the ladies and gentlemen who take the calls initially, who have the victims of crimes before the cops do, and it is a stressful job. I would encourage you to visit those folks and see what type of work they do, which is just fantastic work that they do. It's a tough job, really a tough job. But we're at 15. We need to get 3 more, and hopefully out of those 40, by the end of the month or the end of September, we will have those 3 vacancies filled. The graduation this year, and I encourage you to attend, is October 3rd for your calendars. It is at 1 o'clock in Ventura. October 2nd, the day before, as usual in the county jury room, we will do the swearing in, and many of you have attended that, and we really appreciate that. So October 2nd, the time is uncertain for the swearing in the day before, and the graduation is October 3rd. Some of you have attended the graduations, and if you've never attended an academy graduation, if you need a ride, we'll take you and bring you back, but I think it's something that you really need to see and I think you'd enjoy it very, very much. So if you need a ride, let me know. October 3rd is the date, but October 2nd, the swearing in would be wonderful for all of you to attend if you can. Our restorative policing team continues to do fantastic work. I have Craig Burley here to talk about one subject matter that one of the council members mentioned a couple of months ago, to talk about those veterans that are homeless in our community. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But if you look and see the enforcement action of the police officers, so far, Q4 misdemeanor citations, 744. Many of these are on the corridor on State Street, behind and in front of businesses. A variety of misdemeanor crimes or citations, 744 misdemeanors. We've made 24 felony arrests, most of those on the State Street corridor of major crimes committed by some of these folks in this community. And of course, misdemeanor arrests are 34. If you look at the numbers below, we really can't take those for granted at all. When you look at the follow-up visits, this means that the police officers assigned to restorative policing in the homeless/mentally ill community, if you will, 1,354 follow-up visits with people they've come in contact. This is not the first contact. This is the follow-up. These officers are making a great effort in attempting to stay in touch and in contact with these folks for either some type of help or services or other type issues. That's a lot. We've placed back with their families 23 individuals who are homeless, who are mostly out of our state, and we've been able to relocate them with their families. I think that's a great service. We do not just automatically send them, however. They go through some programs here, they get some help here, and in the interim, their families are notified, and if a reunification is wanted by the individual, we certainly can't force him or her, then my officers make every effort to do that. Calls for service interventions, 94, and again, the reunifications, 9. That's what I meant by the reunifications with families. The new placements are housing placements, many times taking folks all the way to Los Angeles, if not further, when we don't have enough beds here in our community. And over this time period, we had 1 veteran assisted, but we're going to get into depth about the veteran issue here in our community. A couple of you have spoken to me over the last few months about how our, what we call blue shirts and yellow shirts are doing. Do we have enough? And my answer last couple months ago was we do have enough, and they're doing a great job. The restorative outreach specialists, 414 hours worked. They've made 159 contacts. The community service liaisons, hours worked, over 900, and number of business contacts, almost 5,000. Their job in terms of the liaison is to go to every business on Milpas and State Street and around the surrounding areas of those corridors, and meeting with the business community and let them know we're there, and to take some of their cares and concerns under our umbrella. This year, the Central Coast Collaborative on Homelessness did their survey, as you're all aware. There were 1,111 surveys completed. 886 of those surveyed above were deemed vulnerable with an elevated risk of premature mortality. Pretty serious stuff. And your cops are looking at these folks every day and meeting with them and assisting them every day of the week, 365 days a year. The interesting number is, to me, which addresses the question by council a couple of months ago, was that there are, out of the 886 veterans that we have homeless in our city, are 120 of the 886 are veterans. 120 of those 886 that fall under the vulnerable area. Nationally, 13% of homeless are veterans. Today, locally in Santa Barbara, 14% of our homeless are veterans. We have in South County Veterans Treatment Court, and Craig Burley, I'm not going to read that to you. You can read it quickly if you wish, but Craig Burley is going to come up and share with you what happens in Veterans Court. One of our judges, you can go to the next slide, Judge Escott, although he's announced his retirement, and we're hoping to get someone in there soon after he leaves, he oversees our South County Veterans Treatment Court. And again, Craig, who's the expert, will share with you what that entails. It's held in Department 12 once a week, I believe. Presently, there are 53 clients in Veterans Treatment Court. 15 of those are currently homeless, living in our streets in Santa Barbara. And those 15 are part of the big number that you saw earlier of people that we contact on a daily basis. Before I finish my slides and the rest of my presentation, I wanted Officer Craig Burley to come up and explain what Restorative Policing Team does with Veterans Treatment Court. He has a couple of great stories about these two individuals from our city. Craig is one of several very dedicated folks that are here. As I've mentioned before, there are so many times on a Saturday or Sunday when I know this man and the others are supposed to be on their day off, are sitting with some of our homeless folks, especially the veterans, under bridges, under trees, on State Street, and I know it's their day off. That is how committed this group of officers is, and I think they deserve our commendation for that. But I'm going to ask Craig to briefly give us a story on how these two individuals ended at the Bimini Recovery Center in Los Angeles. So I'll let him do that, and then I'll return with the rest of my slides, and we're almost done.
Good afternoon, all. Just on this slide, obviously we blurred out the two clients' faces. Veterans Court, it's a group of professionals. The lady in the middle is our VA representative. That's why our court is working in Santa Barbara. Suzanne Dolan, she works basically out of Los Angeles, which is the first stop for our veterans to get services down in Los Angeles. So these two clients, with cooperation for the VA, Los Angeles, and also locally in Santa Barbara, we broke these two individuals out of jail. And Veterans Court is a diversion program for veterans only. And then for the transport, I helped assist VA driving these two clients down to the East Los Angeles Veterans campus, where it's one-stop shopping for the client. They'll get their medication, food, clothing, and then the second stop is the Bimini House, where these two characters can stay up to 18 months, and it's only for VA clients. I'll take questions.
Any questions for him now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do you have an idea of what percentage of the people living on the street are veterans?
I believe when they did the VI count for Santa Barbara County, it was 14%.
Okay, thank you.
There's also Supervisor Lavanino up in Santa Maria is organizing a stand-down on October 19th. It's an all-day event. It's the second one of its kind, similar to the Project Healthy Neighbors that we see at Casa Esperanza prior to the winter shelter opening, but this is specifically for vets from throughout the county. And later this week at the C3H meeting, we'll get an update about what's going on with that. And I know our restorative policing officers have been connected with that. So thank you for your work there. Thank you, Chief. Go ahead.
Any other questions for Craig?
And just an open invitation for the mayor and council members. Our next Veterans Court treatment, you're welcome to come. It's the first and third Fridays. Our next one is Friday, August the 16th. 1:30, 2 o'clock, open to the public. Department 12, you're more than welcome. Shoot me an email. I can make sure it's going on. And then the one after that is September the 6th, around 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Craig. Our next slide, we can talk about our youth a little bit. And our PAL program, our Police Activities League, continues to do outstanding work. There are so many outstanding programs for young people in this community that just have to choose to want to do it. And one of those is our Police Activities League. The major programs this year, that's the picture of myself speaking to the kids at camp at Lopez Lake, and just an outstanding group of young people, most of them below the poverty line, that could not afford to go to this camp. But because of our funding sources with our Pell events and fundraisers, they were able to go, and other donations. And they had a wonderful time and learned a lot, mostly about themselves and some of the choices that they need to make before school starts in the fall, and making the right decisions. And that's what this was. I was there about half of that day, and they were just, it was hot, bugs everywhere, but I'll tell you, there were smiles from ear to ear about this great opportunity that they get to do some wonderful things and learn about leadership, get tutored and mentored, and encouraged to start this coming school year on a positive note. And it was just outstanding. Quite a few of these young people who are attended, as I mentioned, are well below the poverty line. Many of these young people come from very dysfunctional families, families with single parents or no parents. But they were there to learn, and I was very inspired by these young people who made the choice to go there. Our Campership Alliance, there were over 450 summer camp scholarships given, and that is just a huge success story for us in terms of getting to all the younger ones to really, again, it goes back to the obvious that I'm going to repeat several times today, making appropriate choices for their life, and knowing that in Santa Barbara there are so many positive things to do. They just have to choose to do them. Our Teen Center continues to thrive. This summer, a lot of free summer classes, summer excursions, a free super snack program sponsored by the SBC Food Bank. Again, we take for granted sometimes that many of these kids wake up hungry, literally. And we want them to learn. We want them to have a great learning environment. And if you're hungry and haven't eaten for quite a while, it's hard to motivate them to want to learn a skill when right now they're hungry, literally. So we really want to thank them for their help. Lori Parker's here today. She's doing a great job. The kids are just doing a great thing. The numbers continue to increase in terms of kids joining, and we're going to continue to do some more recruitment when school starts. And we're just excited about that. The next slide. Our Citizens Academies, as you know, we do 2 in English and 2 in Spanish every year. This was the one held at the McKenzie Building on September 4th. Our Spanish Language Academy is tentatively set for September at La Casa de la Raza. We met with them to form a partnership for Spanish-speaking community throughout the city, but it's going to be at Casa de la Raza. Sometime before the end of the year, what we're actually going to do, it's in the planning stages right now, is we're going to have a combination English and Spanish at the same time Citizens Academy, so our communities can talk and work together, and they're going to find out that many of the issues that one group has, the other group has, and we need to get these folks to work together. So that's coming up sometime after the Casa de la Raza Spanish Language Academy. Next, please. Our Explorer Post, this is really quite the phenomenal program. This is scouting within the police department. Many of these young people, all Santa Barbara kids, want to be Santa Barbara cops, Santa Barbara County probation officers. They want to work for the DA's office. They want to be lawyers. I don't hold that against them, so we allow them in the class anyway. That's just a joke. And we had, this year we participated in the Sheriff's Department's Explorer Academy. Officer Casey Butel, Jonathan Reyes, Riley Harwood, my sergeant here to my left, and Adrian Gutierrez really did a great job of working with these young people. This was a 2-week, intense, in-your-face academy, and our folks did fantastic. As you can see, they've chosen, for some reason, one of our folks to do a few push-ups for that instructor. But we went to the graduation. Again, most of these young people below the poverty line. We have several young people there who are actually living in transition housing because they were homeless, but they didn't choose the life of violence or gangs or drugs when they could have, and some have used that as an excuse to join a gang. They chose this program, and they're homeless. So when I hear young people saying there's nothing to do in Santa Barbara, I really find it very difficult to believe. And we've got some of these young people that are doing a great job. Every year at this academy, they choose a leader of the class and select the number one person, and that was one of our young ladies. And she did a fantastic job in leading that class, and we're very proud of her. Her name is Jessica Ochoa. She's one of our sergeants in our group, but she was actually the leader of the group from our folks, Lompoc Sheriff's Department, and Santa Maria, and also Paso Robles, I believe. So we did great. These young people, we have currently 19. Several of them are City College students, but most of them are junior high and high school age. During Fiesta, they gave us 60 hours. During Fiesta week, they did a lot of the work that a lot of other people don't want to do, and they did it with a smile on their face for their community service hours. We are going to attend some competitions. These competitions are marching, police scenarios. Many times the scenario is not a bank robbery. It's dealing with the community. It's dealing with a mentally ill person. It's dealing with an elderly person that needs help. So amongst the physical challenges at these competitions, they're going to be from June 12th to 14th in Modesto. The weather should be really nice for them in Modesto, June 12th to 14th. They're going to compete against other Explorer groups from all over the state. And then again in September 20th to 22nd, another warm day in Paso, and they will be competing at that competition. The Rigetti High School facility was where the academy was held. We sent 8 to it, and they graduated. They did wonderful, and the class sergeant, again, as I mentioned, was Jessica Ochoa, who is just an all-star person. These young people have chosen to do some positive things, and we're very proud of them, and I think the council is as well as we are. That's my presentation. I'm open to any questions you might have, Madam Mayor and Council.
Thank you. I don't see any speaker slips. Chief, on the list in the council agenda report, it also listed the skate park update, and I don't know if there's anything to report. It sort of quieted down after around July 4th, but maybe you could comment on that.
Yes, thank you, and my colleague Nancy Rapp is here, and we worked together with Nancy and her staff. My officers made some arrests of some of the individuals. We're still working on some others that may or may not get arrested. They may just be cited for some misdemeanor commitment of a crime, but we're not ignoring it, and we're working on some of those cases. And I think Nancy and I are agreed that, it's died down quite somewhat. She's planning on doing a meeting there soon to discuss where we go from here, not just with us in the city, but with those folks who utilize the skate park, and just kind of bring it back to center. And this is for everyone to have fun, but we really need to stay on top of it. So we're going to continue to work with Nancy and her staff as a police department to, again, keep it safe, keep it clean, and my beat coordinators are going to play a big part in that. But basically, it has died down quite a bit.
Great, thank you. Other comments or questions from council?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Murillo.
Chief, or maybe Ms. Rapp, did I understand that the skaters themselves are putting on some kind of event on August 14th? And if you have that time, I think they are trying to take some of them are trying to take leadership roles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Murillo. I'm very pleased, actually. I had a number of people from the skateboard community that reached out to me after the closure and all the news coverage, and they were concerned about how the skateboarders were being portrayed in the media and how the actions of a few were having a negative impact overall for all of the skateboard community. So they wanted to meet to see how they could be a part of solutions going forward. So one of the groups that reached out to us is called the Goleta Skate Park Movement. And this is a community group that actually is in the process of designing and building a number of new skate parks in the Nolita, Goleta area. And in fact, they're currently in design review for a park in Goleta. So they're serious, and they're making some very good progress. So working with them, we are working with them literally to host an event on Wednesday, August 14th at 6 p.m. at the skate park itself, and it's called Speak Up for Skateboarding. And this is intended to be the start of a dialogue. Staff will be there to listen and to answer questions that may come up. But the stakeholder group that we're working with are very concerned about how they can add leadership back into the users of our skate facility so that incidents like what occurred don't happen again in the future. So I think we all feel very positively about it. I know that this group is going to be, I just approved the final flyer, so we'll post them at the skate park, and then they'll be doing a lot of promotion of the event in the skate shops, who are also sponsoring the event, and on social media. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity to open up the conversation a bit more and take it in positive directions.
Thank you. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for the Chief. Chief, going back to the calls for service priority 1 and 2 list, as I understand the way you presented this, so the all priorities, the total will be more like along the lines of taking reports, that type of thing. Is that correct? And my question is based on what we get a lot of is, telling people to go ahead and call 911 for basic nuisance issues. Somebody, does it look like they can take care of themselves? Somebody blocking the sidewalk? Where on this chart would that kind of nuisance kind of call fit?
The answer to your first question is no. Or this does not mean that on every call a report was taken at every call for service. Many times there's a call for service and there is no report taken. We do, obviously it's logged, it's on tape. We do share with the dispatcher what the disposition was, and we actually tell them no report was taken, and we leave it at that. But most of the time, yes, for a call for service, most of the time it does call for an official police document of some kind. It might be a crime report, could be another type of report. No, it is not delineated here. These are just response times to the calls for service. The nuisance calls are amongst these, but many times when we get a call, many times, I don't have a number in my head, the call that comes in to dispatch, that gets dispatched to the officer, is a completely different animal altogether when we get there. It just depends on what the situation is. Something might come out. We've had calls where there's a guy with a gun in the front. We show up, there is no gun, but they figured if they told us that, we'd get there in less than 6 minutes. We deal with it, and we move on. In terms of the nuisance calls, usually if the person calling in says, it's a nuisance type call, it is not an emergency where it's life-threatening. We're not going to go the red lights and sirens. So that would usually fall under either priority 2 or even below priority 3 or 4 if it's a nuisance call. We may get there in 3 minutes if there's not any other calls holding, if officers are nearby. A nuisance call may be a 2-minute drive time, and another night it might be 45-minute drive time, depending on the activity going around the city and other calls that officers are on. So it's not delineated by nuisance calls. The other thing that has happened recently, I just received an email from one of you, is that people will dial 911 on their cell phone. That call goes to the highway patrol. It does not come directly to us. But they immediately flip it to us and tell us, but the cell phone call of a 911 call goes to CHP first. We're still trying to statewide try to fix this. I've been a chief for over 20 years. They've been fixing it for 20 years. It's not fixed. So hopefully someday we'll get there. Yes, there are people that do call 911 where it really is not a 911 call. We'll advise the person of that and send a unit anyway. But again, their definition of a 911 may not be that definition for us.
Thanks for that clarification. I would just, because I would think anecdotally that the bulk of calls, since a lot of people don't even have landlines anymore, so that is a major problem. I would think that most of your calls have to originate from cell phones.
Most of them do now.
Yeah.
And again, and that's fine if it's not a 911 call. Well, but nevertheless, it goes to CHP.
Right. Thank you for the clarification.
Well, you can put dispatch on that's what I do on my cell phone. If I call,
Oh, very good.
You just go under D for dispatch.
And push the button.
And push the button. Then that will go right to the right place. So that might be something people could do on their phone. Mr. House.
Chief Sanchez, thank you very much for your report today. And the first thing I just want to say is how much I appreciate the efforts that your team are making to really reach out into the community and to do things that are in the spirit of the restorative justice approach to things. The Veterans Court and working with those with special circumstances and assisting them in getting the resources that they have available to them. I mean, this is part of breaking a cycle that in the past had been just vicious. I mean, just round and around we go. And certainly that's true for our dealing with homeless people. And I appreciate your including in your report the reconnecting people with their families and that kind of thing. It's just, it's different from what some people might imagine police work to be. And I'm glad you're having a chance in these reports to really outline that. Thank you very much. And I agree with you about PAL and the opportunities there are for youth in our community and the fact that the police department is proactive in these, like the Explorers and the others, in providing those opportunities. Again, thank you. Just real quick on the gang incidents, I emailed you a question I had from a constituent about how we define a gang incident, and maybe you'll just share that with those who are watching. So when we get these kinds of reports, we have an understanding as to what qualifies as a gang incident as opposed to some other way of looking at a similar kind of crime.
When we talk about gang incidents, it could be, there's two sides to this answer. Number one, is it gang related or gang involved? If it's gang related, it's usually a gang on gang situation. If it's gang involved, we might have a sole gang member who commits a robbery, but we know he's a gang member and he either admits to it or we know that already from prior contacts and or arrests. That's what the difference is between the two. We also, however, as I mentioned earlier in the other, where they're not committing a crime against another person, they're selling narcotics. Currently, when I speak to my gang supervisors and narcotics officers, the two are intertwined right now in our county, countywide specifically, where we have gang members who are gang members and have been arrested for either a gang crime or have a record of violence and gang activity, but are selling dope on their own. They're selling narcotics on their own. They're still a gang member. We'll list that. Because at times the narcotic sales is for the benefit of the gang. At times we can't prove that. Many times we can only prove that it's either for that sole person's monetary gain or, in fact, use. What's happening now, especially at the high school level, with gang members and non-gang members is the use of marijuana and methamphetamine. Those are still the drugs of choice in our county. The sheriff and I are pulling our hair out over this, and it becomes an epidemic. But in terms of the gang issue, if it is a known gang member in terms of arrest, prior contacts, or admittance by that person, it becomes either gang-related or gang involved. Hope I was clear.
No, that's good. It's good for people to hear that. And then we had a report the other day from Sal with Community Action Commission working on with this coordinated effort that youth who are in terms of conditions, related to gang involvement are down. That we're down about 30%. I think is that the number that we heard?
It's 30%.
30%. That's a pretty significant shift. And do you have any comments on that, or what you see working in that area? Because I know that's been a real concern of ours to try to steer some of these folks into a different path, and something seems to be working. I don't know. Maybe you have some ideas on that.
Well, my opinion is that several things are the catalyst for the great number of 30%. CAC is doing a phenomenal job of doing parenting classes. More and more kids in the last 18 to 24 months are going for services. It's shocking and amazing how many of our young people below the age of 18 are already alcoholics. But fortunately, through CAC and other nonprofits, quite frankly, a lot of kids this year have made the decision to move in a different direction in a positive way. I think that has a lot to do with it. But when I've seen and experienced the parenting classes that CAC offers, it is phenomenal how they get through to the community in terms of the holistic approach of the whole family getting involved in the curing of this person or even the family itself. So I think it's a combination of things. A little bit of luck doesn't hurt. But the number 30% that these young people with the terms and conditions are fulfilling that. Many of them, as Saul said, I was here when he mentioned the fact that many of them are leaving probation on good terms. That's all very positive. There are still those that continue to make some mistakes, and those are the ones that we're having to deal with in terms of the heavy crime that we see. But I think that's part of it. But the largest part is that I think more and more of the parents are becoming more involved, and that's very encouraging to us.
My last question goes to the future. Perhaps you would give us a little more detail next time on what you're seeing happening with the incidences of methamphetamine use in communities all over the nation. That's been a scourge that has just really decimated some communities. And it usually goes kind of under the surface until it just wipes out a upstanding family or something, becomes big news or something. But we haven't heard very much about that recently, and maybe it's something we can look into a little bit more in the future.
We'll do that, and I'll bring my narcotics supervisor or manager for that to share the shocking news that the narcotic use and abuse runs the gamut in terms of economic status, ethnicity, gender. I think you'll all be unfortunately shocked at what's going on in Santa Barbara County, and we'll make that a part of my next presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, thank you for your report. I think these reports are helpful. They establish a helpful pattern with not only with us, but with our community to be able to have this time together. You raised a point which I think is an interesting one, and that is that the cell phone calls are going to the CHP. Do we have a sense of what that time gap is? I mean, we talk about the excellent response times. Is there a quantifiable gap there that is occurring with that extra step?
Seconds, just seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you for the report, and I also just want to publicly express my appreciation to the excellent work, especially during Fiesta, of your whole department. I know no news is good news, but it doesn't happen by accident. It's because of all the planning ahead of time and the hard work during those Fiesta days. So I appreciate that very much. We have a stellar department.
You're welcome, and I thank you for the words of support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to council member committee assignment reports. Anything other than Fiesta? I mean, there was a lot going on with Fiesta last week. We just finished the report. I asked if there was any public comment, speak, or slip, so you're welcome to speak to the chief when we're done. So, Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Tuesday, the Martin Luther King Jr. Committee held a town forum. It was inspired by the George Zimmerman verdict and the Trayvon Martin issue, and it was about race relations. A pretty heavy-duty night. There was a big open mic period, and a lot of people stepped forward to talk about what they felt were racial profiling and other instances of racial discrimination that they've experienced on campus with various law enforcement. I was disappointed that they didn't have another date to come back and have more discussion, but they were asking local governments and elected officials to come forward with initiatives. So that's certainly something I care about, and I think I will be getting back in touch with them to find out if anyone really wants to take something forward. I'd like to congratulate the Mariachi Festival. They don't just provide that wonderful concert, but they raise money for college scholarships for high school students countywide. So we do have fun at Fiesta, but and then like at the Mercado, the Mercados, the nonprofits raise money. So it's not just fun. We're trying to raise money too for good causes. Thank you.
Exactly. Anyone else? Okay, if we can have item number 13.
Real property negotiations for acquisition of easements over 13 East Cabrillo Boulevard, 21 Helena Avenue, and 6 State Street. And item number 14, conference with labor negotiator.
Thank you, and we will adjourn from closed session. Thank you very much.